Welcome to the Meta Business Innovation and Technology Podcast. Conversations with industry leaders on new trends and products that can grow your business. In today's episode, we delve into the art of brand building in the digital age with host Eva Press, Vice President in Meta's Global Business Group, and our special guest, Shakir Moin, Chief Marketing Officer for Coca-Cola North America. Eva and Shakir explore how iconic brands like Coca-Cola stay relevant through continuous innovation and storytelling. They discuss the role of AI in marketing, the importance of data in driving growth, and the strategies Coca-Cola uses to create memorable experiences for consumers. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind building brands that stand the test of time.
Hello, everyone. I am Eva Press. I'm a vice president in Meta's Global Business Group, and I lead a number of our vertical teams in the U.S., including consumer packaged goods, retail, health, and e-commerce. I've been with Meta for a little over 13 years, but before coming to Meta, I spent 10 years in brand management at Kraft Foods, Mondelez, leading iconic brands like Planters Nuts and Oreo cookies. So as much as I love the performance marketing that our platforms do so well, I am truly passionate about brand building, which is why I am so happy to have Shakir Moin, Chief of Marketing for Coca-Cola North America, here with us today. Because when you think about brand building and iconic brands, I think he has one of the best jobs in the world. So Shakir, I'll let you do a more formal introduction of yourself now.
Thank you, Eva, and what a pleasure to connect with you and with Meta. I do agree. I really do feel blessed that I have the best job in the world. I've always felt this in various jobs that I've done. So I've been with the Coca-Cola company for 28 years. This is my 11th country living and working for Coke. When I joined the company, I was a brand manager at the time. And over the last 28 years, I've worked in sales, marketing, brand management, strategy, general management. I've been in the US now for about 7 years. My last role before moving to the US was I was the CEO for Costa Coffee, a company that Coca-Cola acquired in 2019. And the last 7 years, I worked in our global growth function in the US, part of my role out for Costa here in the US. And since January 2023, as Chief of Marketing for Coca-Cola North America.
Fantastic. Such good brands that you get to work with every day. I do want to jump in right away to talking about brand building, and particularly brand building in today's digital world. For those of us who have been in marketing for a long time, I think we fundamentally believe in the power of brands. So Shakir, I'd love to start by just asking, why are you passionate about brand building?
Yeah, so listen, it's when I was a student, it started over there. I was a student of management, focusing in finance. And I first came across marketing and through textbooks. And the whole notion of how great brands understand humanity and human beings and culture and try to distill and bring elements of that into a product, and the product turns into brand fascinated me. And for, almost now 30 plus years of my career, I've been blessed to work on that and to figure out, how do we convert products into brands? And the fundamental lens that at least we work with is that the differential between a product and a brand is a memory. We use a lot of products on our day-to-day life, but we don't have a memory associated with it. And the advantage or the benefit of a great brand is they end up creating memories. And the stronger the brand, the stronger is the memory. Whether it's many of the Coca-Cola brands or some brands that we all live with, we admire, that we wear, that we buy, that we use. And that's exciting. And equally, the challenge is how do we keep those memories refreshed? So Coke is a 130-year young brand, and keeping that memory refreshed for 138 years is a phenomenal exercise that we constantly review back and learn from, whilst taking accountability and responsibility of creating those new memory structures for the future.
It's so interesting to think about a brand as a memory, but also as a memory that has to constantly be refreshed and be sort of recreated for every next generation. Because while it's a memory, it can't be a static memory because then it sort of loses relevance, right?
Absolutely. I use this line to explain this idea that a brand is a promise wrapped in an experience inside the memory. So the 3 word, it's a promise, experience, and the higher order is a memory. The promise of a brand, sometimes timeless, sometimes it's timely, but it's a promise. It's always a promise, something that brings trust between a consumer and the user with that particular product. The turn of the product to a brand is the first experience with which the brand gets in touch with the consumer. And when you think of ourselves, right, our regular human lives, any memory that we have with our family, friends, our children, our spouses, they're all embedded in an experience.
This idea of branding and the importance of brand building is coming up more and more in conversations that I'm having with CMOs across the board. And this idea that there's a refreshed interest in understanding the need to invest in brands. And there's something about this particular moment in time that seems to be driving that renewed interest in building brands. I'm curious if there's anything that you're seeing that's recommitting you to the idea of investing behind brands for the Coca-Cola North America businesses.
Listen, fortunately for us, there's such a strong belief within the Coca-Cola company on the fundamental notion of brand that it remains unchallenged, is not something that we ever worry about or ever think about. It's like literally in the DNA that we got to build brand. However, we are a company which is very discontent with status quo. When things are working really well is when we are the most thirsty for change. And about 3 years back, we worked on what we internally call marketing transformation. And the genesis of the transformation was anchored on what happened during COVID. When we looked at data, for example, for North America, about the incidence of digital usage across US was about 25% around 2018, 2019. And that number jumped to 65% in 2023. I think that number is higher even today. So 20 years, give or take, of digitization and at 25%. And then suddenly 2 years, it jumps to 65%, almost 2.5x. And we realized that our consumers have evolved, they've changed, but we have not changed ourselves by 2.5x. And we have to, because if we don't, we may become irrelevant as consumers would have gone into a high learning curve. And that led for us to lead a very significant, perhaps the deepest marketing transformation in our history. And that has been the most rewarding and phenomenal part of my job, to be part of that journey and in some way contribute to that chapter as part of Coca-Cola North America.
What do you think has gone as well or even better than you would have expected on that journey? Where do you think that things were harder than you expected them to be or didn't go as well?
Yes, the things that have gone really well that we think we have made tremendous progress in. One is we doubled down on reimagining, revisualizing, and sort of resharpening our craft on storytelling. As I said, that brands are memories, memories are stories. And if you don't get our craft right and literally best in class of storytelling, we lose that edge on building great brands. So we double down on this every 14 days. Myself and our 4 creative leads, we sit together and we look at how we're shaping stories. This is not an approval process. This is us looking at the stories that we're building around our brands, how we're creating those memory structures, and what else can we learn from outside in. We're very focused on outside in learning as well as, what happens inside. So I think that has gone really well. The other thing was a fundamental shift towards data and attribution. And it's a responsibility that every single dollar we are spending is attributed towards growth, getting new consumers who should be drinking and buying a portfolio of brands, and therefore driving growth. There's a very little space, I guess, internally amongst us to just do marketing for the sake of marketing. The third thing, fundamental shift that we have done is everything around building capability within. The belief that we have is that world-class people build world-class brands. And it's not that the way around. World-class brands do not build world-class people. It's always human beings who do awesome job. And the secret formula of Coca-Cola has remained and is going to be for the longest time the people who work on the brands, not only Coca-Cola, but beautiful brands like Fairlife and Sprite and Core Power. So our focus on building capability has been transformational and phenomenal. Some of the things that we still got to work on is the second space, which is around attribution and data. I think we have made phenomenal progress, but we are literally on, as I call, the first sip of the total consumption. And the first sip is probably a 100-year journey. I think we'll never stop on it, but we're taking literally the first step on it. We are, as I said, discontent with our progress. And the second area is around artificial intelligence. We all know that's very topical for everyone who's working on any industry, any facets of now our lives. We started very early on AI. Our leaders actually helped create a great bridge with ChatGPT in its very early days. And we're able to bring AI faster than probably most organizations in the US. But still, we are at the first baby steps on AI, and we're trying to rapidly build our own understanding and how AI can be leveraged faster, stronger for driving marketing efficiency as well as its impact.
I'm impressed we made it this far in our conversation without AI coming up. So yay us. We've been talking about marketing for a little while without AI. I love the way that you talk about that transformation because, creative is at the heart of brand building and creating those experiences and memories that you talked about. And from our own research, we've seen that % of the value of any work or campaign that happens on our platform is driven by the creative. So getting that storytelling right is so important. And then obviously being able to measure it and understand it is also so important. That to me is, I think, some of the most interesting. People always tell me measurement and data isn't that sexy. I think it's pretty sexy. So we'll come back to that. And obviously you have to have the right people. And AI, I think, is going to fundamentally transform so much. We're seeing it on our platforms. I do want to come back to that in just a minute. Well, let's take a minute and talk about the data piece and how you're using and building on your data capabilities in order to drive the business. Because you're doing some really interesting things with us that I would love for you to talk about.
Never before we are able to work with data at a scale that is highly efficient for us to do that than any other point in time. Collection of data is becoming a lot more easier. Buying data is becoming a lot more easier, but also there's so much accessible data, aka free data that is available, that not leveraging this is a little bit of a sin, and not taking advantage is unforgivable. So as an example, we try to mine and understand why are human beings drinking different type of beverages. So why does person X drinks a Coke versus a Y drinks a juice versus a milk versus a coffee versus a tea? What time of the day, when, what are the on-ramp, off-ramps into the category? And because of the evolution of the beverage category, this changes over a period of time. Now, historically, a research of that quantum would take us about 7-8 months, was fairly expensive because to get across all the categories, big enough sample size of North America was a big exercise. And because of the size and quantum, we would do this every 5 years, which we knew intuitively that was a bit too late. It should have been done every 2.5 years or 2 years, but the cost was prohibitive. Now, using data, we have been able to do this at literally 1/10 of a cost at half the time period, with an ability that now we can refresh that data every 3 months and get a much more closer to market read. Now, that helps us understand the where to play opportunities for the brands, right? So how to position a brand in a category, in a space, how to identify white spaces to create an innovation architecture, how to use that data to understand media capabilities, and how do we get more segmented on our media choices. So that has been a massive unlock, number one. Number two is 330 million human beings in US. And imagine that if we say that this one idea, one story, one memory of a brand X is relevant for 330 million people, we'll all agree it's absolutely wrong. In other words, likewise, creating today 330 million new memories every single day is very expensive. In some cases, almost not possible. But the summit in the middle, where we identify cohorts, where we identify that this proposition is right for this income group or this ethnicity, this part of the country, because of the evolution of the category, is now doable. Now, again, using data to mine those opportunities and figure out that Topo Chico, which is our premium water brand, may not be a national idea today, but it is very relevant in Texas. And how do we go harder and deeper in Texas and mine that opportunity and do it efficiently and effectively and do this and use that thinking model for the entire portfolio of the brand is something that is accessible and possible today. So both from a understanding where to play and then connecting the how to win ideas against data has been a major unlock for us.
It's so interesting to see now. For so long, data was a distinct advantage of sort of historically direct response or e-commerce or performance marketers. And to start to see how CPGs like Coca-Cola are embracing the newer ways that you can capture data and use data to start, to your point, get closer to the point of sale and start to be able to leverage that to be much more targeted and much more specific about not only the stories that you're telling, but who you're telling them to, and then being smart about, using automation to drive the distribution of that content and that storytelling it's really exciting, really interesting. And I think some of the work that you're doing with us right now around driving frequency on our platforms is some of the most innovative work that I have seen that really starts to tap into the kind of data that you've been talking about and the capabilities of our platforms. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you're using the data to drive that specific KPI for you?
So what we have been able to do, and I think I'm so excited about the work that we have done with Meta, which has been truly the best in class for us in terms of how we have worked together, unlocked opportunity, and we're starting to see some really good results coming out of it. One is that, we essentially de-average our media planning, where we said that the media buy is not going to be, let me go and target Gen Zs or Gen Xers, or I want to hit a certain awareness target. What we did as a lead into the brief working with your team, Eva, was trying to identify how do we target consumption and not awareness. That's a big shift, that we were going for behavior and not only awareness. And we broke our target consumer down to 4 big groups. People who drink us on a weekly plus basis. These are more frequent drinkers of our beverages. People who are intenders of our brands. Intenders mean that they're not thinking to buy, but they already drink, but they're not drinking on a very frequent basis. The third group is neutrals. People who have not drunk our brand, a Fanta, let's say, in the last 6 months. And the fourth group is people who have never tried us. So for every brand, we were able to break the target audience down to these 4 groups. What Meta was fantastic at was your team was able to then identify audiences against those groups. And the combination of audience identification and optimization of media was where the magic happened. And I can talk a lot more about later on how the content was adapted against that as well. But the biggest unlock was the audience optimization and then optimization of media, where we started to see effectiveness as well as efficiency really come to life.
When I think about how we can use data today in marketing, I always think of that old John Wanamaker quote around, I know 50% of my marketing is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. And I think I would hope that today we're seeing such a much smaller percentage of the media being wasted because of those capabilities that you mentioned. I do want to talk now a little bit about the creative and the storytelling piece, because as I said before, we know up to like 50% of the impact of a campaign is driven by the creative. So can you talk about how you used the storytelling piece to complement the data piece?
So I'll give a very live example, I think, for everyone who's listening to this podcast. We worked with one of our partners, which is Disney, to create perhaps the biggest initiative that we have led with them this year, which was a partnership with Marvel. And together, Coca-Cola and Marvel came together, 2 iconic brands, going back to the memory structures, right? 2 brands that create memories, have created awesome memories. And we brought 30 of the most iconic characters on our packages. And about 1 billion Coca-Cola packages in North America carried those icons, those characters. Each one of those packages could be activated through AR. The characters came to life, and it was an experience and again, a memory that we were trying to create. Now, the same idea probably a decade back, the same idea probably about 5 years back, would look like that we would create a big piece of copy, a content, a piece of ad, and we would try to figure out how to get 70 plus awareness with at least a 1 plus frequency. That was the maths. And question one was, I think there was very little questionability on why 70% and why 1%. Why not 75? Why not 65? What's the magic number on 70%? And generally, whenever, we got into those questions, everyone looked at everyone else to find the answer. Now, Marvel is a great asset and Coke is a great brand. And I would wish it's relevant for all 330 million Americans. But that's a really good hope and wish on my side. And till the time that happens, I cannot waste my money on, let's say, even 10 people who are not interested on one or either of those. So what we were able to work with your team, Eva, was this hyper targeting using first party data to understand Marvel fans and bringing those content and those experiences only to Marvel fans using the meta universe. So the visualization in our head was, if you see 3 concentric circles, the circle of the Coca-Cola experience, the circle of the Marvel experience, and the circle of the meta universe experience. And truly, I don't want to use our tagline, but magic happened as a result of that. So connection was a great unlock, but also at the same time content, because we were able to leverage long form content, for example, in Reels versus short form content in Instagram. And internally, we had a lot of debate around this, which is, well, Gen Zs are not looking for long form content. And that is not true, because the Gen Zs were the ones who lined up for Barbie and Oppenheimer and Maverick. But the truth is that the Gen Zs are also not looking for 2 minutes or even 30 seconds of boring advertising. Likewise, they also want short content. So, it can be part of their memory structure of a day. And that unlock between long form and short form and customizing content against optimization of audience and targeted media was phenomenally effective for us.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to this idea that there are myriad ways that consumers are looking to both receive and consume content, but also to interact with brands. And so to the extent possible, being able to give a platform like ours different options and then allow the system to find the people who want the longer form version, who want the shorter, quick hit, who are looking for different, they're interested in different characters or different expressions of that same story, is where I think you get some of the magic, as you put it, coming together. I'm also curious, pivot a little bit, but one of the things that I think I hear from CMOs is this struggle between measuring short-term impact and measuring long-term impact, because a lot of the brand work that we do doesn't necessarily show up in a sale the next day. It might show up the next week. It might show up the next month. How do you think about measurement in those situations and how to balance those two?
Yeah. Even recently, I've heard and seen a lot of discussion on performance marketing. And, at least as a sample size of my lens is that I think every marketing should be performance marketing. Because if marketing is not performing, it's a very oxymoronic thing, right? Why would you do non-performance based marketing? Imagine me going to my boss saying, you know what, here's a great example. It doesn't perform, but it's marketing. So every marketing is performance marketing. I think the challenge is, the opportunity is creating attribution to growth with everything that we do. Right? So that's, whether it is short term or long term, it has to be with growth. One. Second is, a former boss of mine used to say that there is no long term without short term. And we have not seen this. We have data that actually leads us to believe in this, that there are things that obviously will give you an immediate impact on return of that particular initiative. And you would see that directly coming to sales. And the things that you seed in again and again, and they lead to a long-term shift. Now, the differential is this, Eva, though. Even in the short term, it should show a measurable demonstration of success. Now, it may not be a transaction and a sale, and that's okay, but it needs to show a connection to transaction and sales. So, for example, let me be super literal on this. As we build a brand, let's say we're building Core Power, which is our high protein milk brand. We want to talk about 26 grams of protein and what protein does for her or him. And at least at the minimum, the purchase intent that, I would want to try this product. At least that comes through. Now, that work should be measurable in the short run or in the short term. That shows the promise of the long term, which means I've gotten to in that individual to at least anchor the brand. And next time I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to buy. She or he buys it, and a few things happen. Buys it and say, wow, this is an awesome product. I'm going to try it again. By the way, it's an awesome product, and actually everyone should try it again. Happens. Goes to the market, doesn't find the product. No sale. Goes to the market, finds the product, but it's very expensive. No sale. Worst case, goes to the market, tries it, drinks it, and says, this is not for me. Yeah, so that's where the intent to buy turns into a transaction. And what we're intending for is that transaction is a behavior. Somebody drinks it on a weekly plus basis. Now, that funnel, Eva, at least in beverages, is not longer than 3 to 4 months. We will be able to find out that what we're doing is resulting in that. Now, remember, this is a very long-term build. So, for example, that I just compressed something in 4 months, doable, measurable, possible. But that's a story of one. I need to reach, let's say in the case of Core Power, I'm going to just throw a random number, but let's say 30 million people in the most efficient and effective way. That cannot happen in 4 months. That's month after month after month, multiple years, consistency, discipline, and that's how great brands are built. So that's the dichotomy of the long term, which is consistency and discipline. But the proof of short term has to be on delivery of what we're doing to an actionable change in perception and behavior, which is eventually going to lead to a transaction.
I talk a lot about reach and frequency. You got to reach the right people, and you just have to keep talking to them and keep talking to them. And there comes a point when I think as marketers, we sometimes get a little bit tired of the same message, but we have to keep reinforcing it because it's so important, to your point, to building that brand over time. And then the other piece that I love that you talked about is the different measurement that you may be looking at different moments in time. We call that sort of 360 measurement, and the idea that you are using a lot of different measurement methodologies to triangulate and understand really what's the impact that you're having on people, both from an attitude and awareness perspective that will ultimately lead into a behavior or action that becomes measurable in the sale at the store and hopefully repeated sale. So I love that you're thinking about it that way.
What we've been able to do as part of this work is, to your point on idea of consistency, which for every brand, we're trying to answer this question on what is a 1 attribute, 2 attributes, 3 attributes that's going to get someone who doesn't consider this brand to become a regular drinker, but anchored into one message, because there's so many messages that we are being bombarded with that we cannot say 5 different things on a brand. Now, that cannot be opinion-based. That's again where data comes in. So we have been able to use data now to understand what is the single most important driver for, let's say, Coke versus Sprite versus Fanta versus Body Armor, and then hone that message in.
I'd love to get your thoughts on, as we look into the future, the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months, what do you think is going to come in digital marketing and social marketing? What are you excited about and curious about?
Listen, recently I read a statistic, and I don't know whether the number is correct or not, but doesn't matter. It feels that it is going to be in that range. And the number I read was that 70% of all media management would be AI influenced and driven. Now, who knows, 70 versus 80 versus 90, but we know it's not going to be 5. And that gets me a little bit, I wouldn't say scared, but more impatient for preparation and more excited because I think the more AI comes in, it's not AI, but what AI is enabling is hyper effectiveness and efficiency. I think it's just going to make me sleep easy at night that our dollars are not being wasted. I'm excited by this and anxious on our ability to get prepared. I think to that idea of we cannot communicate individually to 300 million, 330 million people, I think generative AI can start to give us some solutions around that. And maybe we'll be able to progress. We did a good experiment this year with our start of the year campaign called Proud Sponsors Of, where we created 30,000 individual personalized messages that were delivered personalized using digital media. But that is still a lot of work, which is a combination of AI and manual, and we want to move it 100% to AI. But I think doing it at scale gets me excited because I think we'll be able to see much faster causality around some of the things. The third thing that I'm excited about, so how do we get sharper and better on retail media? How do we create clickability for everything which is non-retail, connecting to retail, the role of retail in building a brand versus only a transaction? But also we forecast and we predict that there's going to be a higher interaction between physical retail and digital media. For example, the notion that somebody's going to switch on the phone whilst they are in a store, they're going to look for coupons or they're going to look for information, and the phone can guide them to a specific area in the store where they can buy the product is now highly feasible and possible. So that's again an exciting opportunity, right? Which is bringing our marketing closer to point of purchase and driving transactability. But that requires another muscle to be built, right? How do we ensure that the targeting is differentiated between the shopper, the type of offer connected to the consumer or the shopper? Those would be the additional dimensions that we got to think through and got to think through fast. And I'm excited that at least internally, we're starting to think very quickly around this.
Yeah. So sounds like it comes back to a couple of the themes we've talked about: AI, automation to drive efficiency and scale, but also personalization. But then at the same time, really thinking through data, and the power of retail media networks is the power of their data and the ability to drive that much closer, to your point, to the point of sale, which has always been that last mile that's been really hard for consumer packaged goods companies that don't own that transaction and haven't been able to see the impact. And so to be able to close the loop in that way, to be able to start to look at what you're doing from a shopper marketing and trade dollar perspective and eliminate some of the blind spots that I think we historically had in that space, I agree, is really exciting. And it'll be interesting to see how that comes to life in the future.
I agree.
I want to close out by just thanking you so much for this conversation, Shakir. I've loved chatting with you about brand marketing, about how it is continuing to shift and evolve with technology, about how you at Coca-Cola North America are really leveraging AI and data and technology to build brands, create memories, and build long-term sustainable businesses. So thank you so much for this time.
No, Eva, thank you. Thank you. It gives me so much belief that we can open more questions between the two of us to be answered to progress this exponentially in the months to come. So I want to thank you and your team for being an awesome partner with us.
And thank you too. We really appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode on the art of brand building in the digital age with our host, Eva Press, and our guest, Shakir Moin, Chief Marketing Officer for Coca-Cola North America. Remember to subscribe to our podcast to get notified whenever a new episode is released. And if you found this episode valuable, please leave us a 5-star review. And thank you for listening to the Meta Business Innovation and Technology Podcast.